We humans have built thousands of lakes and ponds by constructing dams across North America. And these lakes and ponds and reservoirs are just beautiful. They provide us with water to drink, water for raising crops, and places to go fishing. But maybe you didn't know that most of the dams that you see constructed have been built on the same locations where beaver had historically built their dams for beaver ponds. And often these natural beaver ponds were changed into much larger reservoirs by building a dam. Now, all dams that we humans build and that animals build require maintenance. And a beaver dam is no exception. Beaver are on the site 24 hours a day, 365 days a week, maintaining their beaver dam, especially when storms hit. They have to do a lot of repairs. However, when the beavers are killed by predators, their dams will wash out and fail. So dams are built by placing soil across valleys to block a stream or a river or a perennial flow of water in a ditch so that water is backed up to form a lake, pond, or a reservoir. Now, part of the construction of the dam involves building a spillway, and a spillway is built so that water will flow around the dam. Now, if water were to ever flow over a dam, it could wash out the dam and cause great erosion. Now, dams do require maintenance, and you see a list here of the type of maintenance that dams require. First of all, you have to maintain them or they're going to fail. And the pool area can fill with soil, especially if erosional head cuts were initiated when the reservoir was built. And we must maintain a spillway, and this can be expensive. If the spillway fails, the dam can fail. Also, it's important to inspect the dam on a regular basis for erosion after storm events. To build a dam, we often require permits because of public safety. And in many cases, it's necessary to pay for mitigation because building a dam can block aquatic organism passage. Well, this photo shows the remains of a dam that failed on a ranch in eastern Nevada. And this is quite a high dam. This dam was built over 100 years ago, and they did a wonderful job building it. But the dam failed when the spillway was blocked with ice. What was happening is that they were receiving a rain. There was ice on the reservoir. The ice was melting and breaking up. It blocked the entrance to the spillway, and then water flowed over the top of the dam, causing a catastrophic failure of the whole structure. Now, the rush of water coming out of this reservoir destroyed homes, irrigation systems, and washed out a highway and a railroad located downstream. The consequences of a dam failing are huge. People can die and properties destroyed. And the end result is that everybody goes to court and sues everybody and nobody wins. Now, the red arrow points to the section of dam that washed out in Nevada. And I took this photo while standing in the drained basin. When a dam washes out, it goes quickly. If you go to YouTube and look up videos on dams washing out, you'll be amazed how quickly a dam can be destroyed. Now, the failure of this dam in Nevada triggered massive head cuts to form in the basin that was being drained. And these head cuts caused significant erosion and a canyon to form in the valley. The red arrow shows the location of a head cut and the direction it's moving. And a head cut's like a waterfall. However, the waterfall is located in soil. And the head cuts in soil can cause great erosion as they move upstream. They cause a deepening and a widening of the channel. First of all, a gully to form, eventually a canyon to form. Now, these head cuts in Nevada are destroying many acres of natural wet meadows that are located upstream of the drain basin. So that's what happens when a dam fails. It triggers all this erosion in the basin, and then that erosion continues all the way upstream in the valley, and then all that soil gets washed downstream, and it really affects aquatic organisms. Now, here are some of the problems that people can have with constructed dams. First of all, you have to pay for mowing them because you don't want trees or shrubs to grow on the dam. The roots can damage the dam. Animals will burrow into the dam and cause its failure. You need a spillway, and to maintain this spillway, often with rock. The dams look artificial to people. They block aquatic organism passage, and again, permits are often required to build them and to maintain them. Now, when you build a dam, muskrats will eventually burrow into the dam, and they can cause the dam to fail. And their entrance to their burrows is underwater, and then they actually live in the dam above the water level in the reservoir. Now, here's where I did an inspection of a constructed dam and impoundment, and I found that the overflow pipe had been shot 3 times with a rifle, causing leaks. And closer inspection found that there was a hole dug above the drain pipe, and this was dug by muskrats. And the red arrow shows the hole that was dug through the dam above the drain pipe. Now, this muskrat burrow went through the dam, and it was causing the dam to fail. And you can see all the soil that was being washed, not through the drain pipe, but through the muskrat hole above the drain pipe. Eventually, the dam will wash out, and it could happen with one flood event. Beaver will eventually dig burrows through the dams, and they'll dig channels in the dams, and they can cause tremendous amounts of erosion and failure of a dam almost overnight. Now, all water control structures that have been placed in wetlands, ponds, reservoirs, and dams will eventually fail. And when they fail, they can drain the impoundment or the reservoir. And ice has damaged this water control structure that you see in this photo. Now, here we're looking at a water control structure placed in a dam. And this is in a constructed impoundment, and the water control structure is no longer working. There was a wooden walkway leading out to the handle for the valve on the water control structure. The wooden walkway rotted, so you can't walk on it anymore. The valve control structure has rusted and can't be closed or opened anymore. And Beaver have covered the valve plus the ditch that drains water from the structure with tons of debris, everything from clay soil to woody debris. So you can't use it anymore. So that means when there's a flood event, there's really no way for the water to leave the impoundment, and the dam can fail. Now, this is what we call a flashboard riser. It's a water control structure, and these were quite common for quite a few years. In fact, some people are still using them. This one was installed at Burgess James Gadsden Provincial Park near Golden, BC. The water control structure leaks. It doesn't hold water. Water flows through the gaps between the boards and at the ends of each channel where the boards slide in to the structure. And the steel culvert that it was built out of has holes in it, and it leaks. And water is also leaking where the water control structure was attached to the culvert. Now, these structures are dangerous to maintain because what Beaver will do is block the top entrance. And if you try to free up a debris, what can happen is it will suck you inside of the structure and drown you. So I don't recommend using these structures. If you see them in a dam, the structure should be replaced. And they're just bad news because they cause the reservoirs not to hold water. Okay, you're looking at a dam that was built for a wetland, and this one was built in California, and the dam is shown by the red arrow. The dam never held water as planned. And you go, well, wait a minute, dams always hold water. But this dam was built out of sandy loam texture soil, and it was built on a foundation of topsoil that was also sandy loam texture. Now, the dam was originally built over a natural wet meadow wetland. And the dam, what I find with so many dams that they were built out of permeable material and on a permeable substrate. And without a good foundation, they won't hold water. Now, here's a dam, and this one is no longer holding water. And you wonder why. See, somebody's been mowing the top of the dam, which is good, but they haven't been mowing the slopes of the dam. And you see the trees growing on the slopes. Well, those trees have sent roots into the dam and under the dam, and these roots are providing conduits for water to flow under the dam. Now here's a dam that never held water. The dam was constructed using a machine called a dragline many years ago. And the dragline removed the soil that was placed in the dam by digging a long trench or a borrow pit paralleling the inside of the dam. Now, I tested the soils in the dam and in the borrow pit and found out that the borrow pit has sandy textured soil and that the dam has sandy textured soil. Explaining why it doesn't hold water. Water goes right through the dam and right under the dam. So oftentimes when you see a dam, you assume that it was built correctly. After all, engineers have been involved in the construction of most dams. But when you do some testing and digging, you find out the majority of dams were built on permeable foundations, and they're often built out of soil textures that don't hold water. They're not always built out of clay. So many of the dams on our landscape are ripe for failure, and they don't hold water. Now, this dam has been armored with a thick layer of rock from the top to the base. And this was done to prevent muskrats and beaver from burrowing into it. They did a nice job armoring this dam, and there were no muskrat holes in the face of it. Now, few dams have rock like this because of the enormous expense of trying to cover the entire dam with this much rock. And that's why we don't see this very often. Now, here's an old photograph showing a dam that was being built using soil in the area and not clay. When you take a look at the soil that's being dumped out of this truck, you see rock. Well, one thing to remember is that rock and clay do not mix. So when you see rock, you know that the soil is low in clay. What happens is when you build a dam out of a mixture of material like loam and rock, it's going to leak. And it's going to leak through the dam and under the dam. So the dam that was built using this material leaks. Now here's a dam that's being built in the winter when the ground is frozen. Again, look at the soil in the dam that's being graded. It's full of rock. This tells us that there's no clay. Now, another thing that happens is that if you build a dam in the winter, the soil's going to be saturated. You can't compact soil that's saturated. Also, if you build in the winter, the soil can be frozen and you're not able to compact soil that's frozen. So if you build a dam out of soil that's not compacted, it's going to leak and it's going to fail. Now, these individuals are standing in a channel that was caused by water flowing over a dam, and this caused a breach in the dam, and this washed a big channel through the dam. And there are so many dams across North America that are failing and they're too expensive to repair. And what we're going to look at is how these dams may be removed and the valleys restored. Now, in my travels, I find out now that very few people know how to build dams. Now, I've built over 1,400 dams in my career, and now I work to remove them. But what I find is that engineers are not taught how to build dams anymore in school. So when you come into a project where the dam needs to be removed or repaired, people are at a loss because there's so little information about dams and dam construction. Okay, it is important to have a good access road when you're removing a dam and restoring a valley. And I know this seems really basic, but people will set up a project and they have a poor quality road with all sorts of potholes in it and places where you can get stuck. Guess what? You're not going to be able to restore a valley or remove a dam with access like that. You have all sorts of people driving in every day and dump trucks. So when you work on a valley restoration project, dam removal project, it's best to improve the quality of the road and to use a dozer and an excavator to grade the road, to fill in potholes, to add gravel to the soft spots, to create safety turnouts where if you meet a big truck, you can pull off the road. And also the road is important if you want to bring in large woody debris, haul out water control structures and pipes. So in this road, we placed numerous dips. The red arrow shows a gradual dip, and this is to carry water off of the road so it won't stand on the road and form potholes. And these dips are a low-cost way, and you don't have to use culverts this way. And it's a good way to carry water off the road so the road won't turn into mush. Now, when you're removing a dam, it's important to remove the majority of water from the reservoir before the dam is removed. And this will prevent major erosion from occurring when you remove the dam. And it also reduces impacts to fish and will lower the costs associated with pumping water out of the reservoir. So generally, you remove large amounts of soil from the reservoir in the basin and the dam. And so having this water removed prior to construction is a huge bonus. So this photo shows a valley soon after the water from the reservoirs were drained, and they were drained by opening the drain pipe that was installed over 100 years ago when the dam was built. Now you see exposed mud flats here when the water was removed in this reservoir, and these can become attractive places for off-highway vehicle users to ride. And the ruts you see in this photo left by dirt bikes riding the mud flats in the drained reservoir. And these dirt bikes are causing erosion. They're running over amphibians and they're crushing native plants. Now, when we drained this reservoir basin, we found the stumps of large western red cedar trees. You can see these stumps in the drained basin. They were not visible before the water was drained out of the basin. And the trees have been cut and removed prior to when the dam was constructed. Now, in this reservoir basin, there was a thick layer of organic soils. And oftentimes people will tell you that the reservoirs are filled with soil from erosion. Well, I've seen with most of these valley restoration projects that the reservoir basins are not filled with soil. And these soils were historically present in the valley. How do we know this? Because there's 100-year-old stumps that were not covered by soil that would have washed into the basin if erosion was occurring upstream. Now, this photo shows a drained reservoir basin in the second summer that it was drained. And pools of water remain in the basin. And these pools are not being backed up by the dam. These pools were actually created when soil was dug out of the basin to build the dam. So these pools really have nothing to do with the dam. If you remove the dam, these pools can remain because the dam is not pushing water and keeping these pools full of water. So the pool of water is at a lower elevation than the historic top of the dam that was constructed. And notice the bright green color of plants that are naturally growing in the drained basin. I find that when we remove water from a reservoir, the plants come in quickly that have laid dormant in that soil. Now, determining the elevation, the original elevation of the valley before the dam was built can be quite challenging, especially when the reservoir is filled with water. It's much easier to determine what the original elevation of the valley was when the water's been removed from the reservoir. Now, in this photo, the tree stumps can be seen, and these were growing along the stream bank before the dam was constructed across the valley. So what we did is a lot of testing and soil sampling. We figured out that, hey, we're looking at the original elevation of the stream and floodplain before the dam was built. So we set wooden stakes in the ground to guide with the removal of the dam. And we recorded the geodetic vertical datum elevation at each stake, and we determined this using a laser level and a GNSS unit. So when you remove water from a reservoir, you're going to cause head cuts to form in the basin where water is flowing. The basin is filled with saturated soils, oftentimes that are high in organics. And what you can see in this photo is that erosion is occurring in this recently drained reservoir basin. Now, the natural changes in the valley prior to dam construction show us that the stream was quite a bit different. The original stream in this valley was narrow, and the original stream was sinuous, and the floodplain was quite low with low stream banks. So once we pulled the water out of this reservoir, we triggered head cuts to form. These are rapidly moving up into the valley through the advancing, with the advancing head cuts. And these head cuts are causing deep eroding drainages and stream channels, with vertical banks on them. And we're going to discuss how to control head cuts in a drained reservoir basin a little bit later in this presentation. So here's where the excavator has begun the process of removing a dam. Now, because there was a rock that was placed on the face of this dam, we're removing it and we're going to use it when we restore the stream that goes over the removed dam. So what we did here is we did not place the rock in trucks to move it. If you place the rock in trucks to move it, the cost of your project goes way up and it takes longer to complete. Now, we don't mind a little bit of soil mixed in with our rock because we're going to be using this dirty rock to restore streams, floodplains, and the spillways of wetlands. And if there's some soil mixed in with the rock, it's going to support invertebrates and plants. So here's one of the large piles of rock that we removed from the surface of the dam. And we're going to use this rock to build vertical grade control structures and to control erosion in the streams that we're restoring. Now, this dam was built with a concrete core. And concrete cores are generally used when little clay is available in the area. And this concrete core was impermeable and it allowed the dam to hold water without clay textured soils. Now, the concrete core that you see here was responsible for the dam holding water, and permeable sandy loam textured soil was mixed with rock and used to support the concrete core on either side, forming the top and the sides of the dam. Now, this is an excavator using what's called a breaker and a large breaker, and this is being used to hammer and to break apart the concrete core in the dam. Now, the concrete cores can be substantial structures that are often reinforced with rebar, and it takes a pretty good sized excavator and breaker to dismantle these. So here's the excavator with a breaker attachment, moving the concrete core while the dozer actually lowers the dam. And a second excavator is being used to pile rock that was on the surface of the dam. So here the excavator is removing the concrete core while the dozer removes soil from the front and back of the dam. And we're using this soil to shape a natural appearing contour in the valley. Because the majority of the soil came from when they dug the basin for the reservoir, we're going to return it to the basin. And instead of having right angles, we're going to have natural contours. If we put the soil in a truck and moved it off site, it would be extremely expensive. And who knows, the contractor might use the soil to fill other wetlands. So if we keep it on site, we know where it's placed, we can shape it, we can loosen it and get it to grow native plants. So you're looking at a picture of the concrete core here, and the red mark shows the excavator operator how much to lower the elevation of this concrete core. Now, we lowered the concrete core to approximately 15 centimeters below the elevation of the floodplain we were restoring. Now, the remaining concrete core was left in place, and this was done to serve as permanent buried vertical grade control to prevent possible head cuts from advancing upstream following the dam removal. When you remove a dam, you're going to trigger head cuts to form. You must plan actions that prevent these head cuts from advancing. And here we had all this concrete buried in the ground. Let's repurpose it and use it to protect our project from head cuts. Here we're removing chunks of concrete from the core, and we're moving this concrete to higher ground. And we're going to build a snake hibernaculum from this concrete by burying it in the ground. Now, we're using the soil here to shape a natural appearing valley to try to restore the natural contours on the site. So when removing a dam, it's critical to install buried vertical control structures that span the width of the valley and that will prevent head cuts from forming that will cause erosion. And we're using large boulders here, and we're placing these across the valley and keying them into the banks, provide permanent vertical grade control for the restored stream and for the floodplain we're restoring where the former dam was located. So these boulders are being set on bedrock foundation. And we're looking upstream here. You can see that we're actually looking upstream in this photo. Okay, here's where we're building the snake hibernaculum from the concrete that was removed from the core. In many cases, we're not allowed to use concrete in flowing water. So in this case, we move the concrete to higher ground and put it in a dry location. And this should provide the snakes with many, many places to spend the winter. In fact, this may be one of the largest snake hibernaculums I've ever built. We place cardboard over the concrete before covering this concrete with a thick layer of soil. And then we placed boulders with flat surfaces near the entrance of the hibernaculum for snakes to use when they're basking and before they enter the hibernaculum. All right, what you're looking at here, it kind of looks like a mess. It's soil, and it was placed in the original spillway for this dam that was removed. So what we did, the original spillway was an artificial channel. When we removed the dam, we placed the soil and we filled the spillway and we recontoured it and we made it so it would blend with the natural landscape. Now here's the floodplain that we're building following the removal of the dam. The dam has been completely removed. We have shaped a natural valley and we are now working on the floodplain for the stream. So the laser you see there is called a dual plane laser, and this allows you to measure slope, to set slope with the laser. And then we mounted a laser receiver on the stick of the excavator, and this helped the excavator operator to get the right slope on the valley. So this valley or floodplain was made level in cross section with a sinuous stream channel that's dug 15 centimeters deeper near the center of the floodplain. And you can see the laser receiver mounted on the stick of the excavator, and it's just above the thumb attachment. The green light shows the operator that they're following the planned slope for the stream and the floodplain. And here, a large diameter rock that was removed from the surface of the dam is now being used to armor the floodplain and the channel. And this rock is being placed in a layer that's 70 centimeters thick. When you rebuild a stream over a steep slope and the stream is not flowing on bedrock, it's important to form a foundation out of large enough rock so head cuts won't move through and you won't have erosion. So here, rock is also being placed up on the banks of the restored floodplain, and this is being done to prevent erosion from flood events. And we expect beaver to move in and to eventually dam this restored stream. And if we put rock up along the edge of the banks, head cuts can't form that go around the beaver dams. Now we place a thin layer of topsoil, about 15 centimeters thick, over the floodplain. And you see here, we have this base of 70 centimeter thick rock on the floodplain. And now we're throwing organics and topsoil over the floodplain, but we leave the center open for the stream channel, because if we were to cover the stream channel with the soil, it could wash downstream during the first runoff event. So here's the restored stream channel. It's now flowing over the removed dam location. The restored stream channel averages 2 meters wide. The floodplain, which is only 15 centimeters higher, is 10 to 12 meters wide. We have yet to place large woody debris on the floodplain, but as you can see, the stream is now flowing over the removed dam. Now we placed boulders along the restored stream to create pools and riffles for aquatic organisms. And you can see the topsoil that was spread on the floodplain, but yet no topsoil was spread in the channel. And here's the restored valley following removal of the dam and spillway. The elevation of this wide floodplain is only 15 centimeters higher than the stream channel. When there's a flood, we want water to come out of the stream and flow across the floodplain and not cause erosion. If you try to build a stream channel that will keep floodwaters, you will have lots of erosion and your stream will look like a ditch. When you take a look at natural streams and valleys, their pressure relief is the floodplain. So when there's a freshet, that water flows across the floodplain, saturating it, recharging wetlands, and not causing erosion. So here's the restored stream with pools and riffles that's only 1 day old when this photo was taken. So we placed rock armoring along the banks and above the restored elevation of the floodplain. And this rock armoring went above the restored floodplain by about 1 meter in elevation. And this is to protect the banks of the stream from eroding should there be a flood or if a beaver ever builds a dam across this restored stream. So these photos show the valley before and after the dam was removed. There's a lot of large woody debris that was placed in the floodplain, and this was placed to help control OHV vehicle access. So restoration of the valley and the basin should begin soon after the dam is removed. And in this photo, you see Bidens, which has the yellow flower, and smartweed, which has the pink flowers. These are naturally growing in the basin within a year of removing water from the reservoir. And these plants grow in wet meadow wetlands, and they provide outstanding habitat for a diversity of pollinators, including bees, butterflies, and moths. So areas of these wildflowers were left undisturbed as part of the restoration project. Now, in the basin, that's the drained reservoir, we wanted to restore wetlands. After all, the dam was more likely built on a beaver pond, on a beaver dam, and also the basin once contained beaver. So we marked the perimeter of wetlands to be restored in the drain basin using a laser level and using wire plastic flags. And we built wetlands of various shapes, sizes, types, and hydroperiods in the drained basin of the reservoir. And the wetlands you see are all less than 1 week old when these photos were taken. So you're going to be seeing a lot of exposed soil. Well, I look forward to returning to the area and taking photos now, because I'm certain that there's quite a diversity of sedges and bushes growing in and around the restored wetlands. So the wetlands in the former reservoir basin were built using an excavator, and the excavator stayed afloat by traveling on logs. And the wetlands were built to be deepest in the middle with gradual slopes. We built the wetlands without the use of dams, berms, diversions, ditches, wells, pumps, or water control structures. We built the wetlands so they would look and function like natural wetlands, provide habitat for a diversity of animals, and not require maintenance. And we didn't compact any of the soils. They're all loosened so plants will grow and we won't have erosion. So here you see a shallow water bay. The wetland is beginning to fill with water, and the bay was lined with soils that were high in clay. And this was done to provide staging areas for western toad larvae and for toadlets. We placed snags of all different sizes in and around the restored wetlands and streams to provide habitat for birds and bats. So you are looking what used to be a reservoir. The reservoir has been drained, the dam's been removed, the erosion's been controlled, and all these wetlands have been restored. So the red arrow points to one of the many head cuts that was advancing in the stream within the drained basin. Remember, when you remove a dam, you will trigger head cuts and massive erosion. So these head cuts had been historically stopped by large diameter trees that had fallen in the basin and by beaver dams. But now the beaver dams are gone and the big trees were removed, and all we have are these exposed organic soils that are rapidly eroding. So when you walk the stream in the drained basin, you see the remains of beaver dams. And these old beaver dams are preventing head cuts from advancing up the historic stream channel. There's a mixture of branches and soil and mud have been preserved for over 100 years. These historic beaver dams spanned both the stream channel and the floodplain, and they served as a guide to knowing what to do to prevent erosion in this restored valley. And when you walk the valley of the stream that was exposed following removal of water from the reservoir, you can see logs that have been buried across the stream channel and the floodplain for over 100 years. And this log is serving as a natural vertical grade control to prevent head cuts from advancing upstream. And look at how the banks of the stream are slightly higher and the channel is slightly wider downstream of the log. That's where erosion's occurring. But upstream of the log, there's no erosion occurring, and the log is not rotted because it's been saturated all these years. So this showed us that we can place logs across the stream and restored floodplain, and these will prevent head cuts and erosion from occurring. So what do you use as a guide to restoration? Well, we went upstream of the reservoir, and stream reaches in the same valley on slopes similar to where the dam's being removed can be used as a guide for restoration. And here's a natural section of stream that was identified upstream of the drained basin following the removal of the dam. And this stream channel is narrow, it's shallow, and the stream is sinuous, and the banks are only 15 centimeters higher than the elevation of the water in the stream channel. And there's no erosion occurring. So this snapshot helped us to design the restored valley. Now, we brought in logs averaging 24 inches in diameter that were from 40 to 44 feet long, and they were delivered to be used in improving habitat for wildlife and for building vertical grade control structures. However, we found that large diameter western red cedar logs do not work for building vertical grade control structures. Why? Because they float within a couple of days of installation. They do work for snags and for habitat logs. Now, we had a fair amount of rock that was not needed for armoring the restored streams and floodplain, so we moved this to various locations in the basin, and we used this rock to control head cuts that were causing erosion. Now, here's a large diameter log. It's at least 18 inches in diameter and over 40 feet long. And we buried these across the channel in the restored floodplain and across the channels of tributaries to provide vertical grade control. So these logs that were buried prevented head cuts from forming that would cause erosion. We found that the logs from Douglas fir trees were preferred because they wouldn't float. Now, we buried these logs and we embedded them deep into the ground so only the top of the log was visible in the bottom of the stream channel. So these logs are not dams. Notice the top of the log is visible in the bottom of the stream channel. They are vertical grade control designed to prevent head cuts from advancing up the stream channel. So we also placed logs at the inlets and the outlets of restored wetlands to prevent head cuts from advancing through the restored wetlands. So here you see 3 logs that are buried across the restored stream and floodplain to serve as vertical grade control. And the lower logs are what we call splash logs. And we placed these where there was a strong stream flow and on steeper ground. And the elevation at the top of the splash logs is set to be slightly lower than the top of the adjacent grade control log. Logs, the logs that are marked using the red arrow, these are forming a natural riffle crest where water from a stream enters a restored wetland. Now, where we had the sod and roots and leaves of sedges, we placed these over and around each log that was placed to help us control erosion. Now, here's one of these artificial beaver dams. What we're looking at here is a mixture of alder branches and soil that was pushed into this incised stream channel, both upstream and downstream of the log that was placed for vertical grade control. So these materials were keyed into the banks on either side of the stream to prevent water from flowing around the end of the structure. So what you're looking at here is a human-made beaver dam where everything is buried, including the larger logs. And the mud is mixed in with the alder branches, and these were quite effective at controlling erosion. So this photo shows another log that was placed for vertical grade control, where the branches and the mud were placed upstream and downstream of the log. And this technique is similar to how a beaver would dam a stream and is very effective at slightly raising the elevation in the ditch or stream without causing erosion. So the use of large diameter logs, mud, and branches can be an effective way of restoring water levels in incised streams where rock is not available. Now, beaver have built a dam over the top of 2 logs that were placed for vertical grade control. And their dam raised the elevation of water in the stream 15 centimeters higher than the surface of the logs. But the beaver kept adding material and were preventing erosion from occurring. So when you place these logs for vertical grade control or rock for vertical grade control, you actually form foundations for beaver to build their dams, which is okay. So here's where rock from 6 to 12 inches in diameter was placed across the stream and floodplain to control head cuts from forming. And the rock was placed in a trench that extended across the width of the floodplain and was keyed into the banks of the stream. It really doesn't look like we did anything here. And that means it's successful because most of the natural grade control in streams is buried. It's not above the ground. We use the rough and loosen technique with pit and mound topography to prepare soils in the basin for planting. And you can see these shallow depressions that trapped precipitation. And these shallow depressions will allow water to soak into the ground, saturating soils and preventing erosion. These saturated soils that are used, where they were paired with the rough and loosen technique, they're going to develop into wet meadows, shrubs, and forested wetlands. Here's how one of the basins appeared within days of restoring the wetlands and installing the logs and rock for buried vertical grade control. Quite a change. You know, one of the biggest concerns in removing a reservoir is that you're removing all that water and all that habitat. Most people that remove dams simply cut a hole through the dam, which causes a breach and triggers the erosion of the entire valley and the drainage of the whole valley. Why not restore wetlands and streams how they appeared naturally before the dam was built? And it just makes so much sense, and we won't lose habitat, we'll gain habitat. So these photos show an area within the drained basin following the control of head cuts, removal of the dam, and restoration of incised channels. And this is all very new. These photos were taken within a couple of days of construction being completed. Cottonwood trees are likely to colonize the higher ground within your restored basin, especially where the soils have been loosened using the rough and loosen technique. So here an excavator is being used to remove a smaller dam. This smaller dam was made out of soil. It did not have a concrete core. The spillway for the dam was filled in and the valley was recontoured with soil removed from decommissioning the dam. So the original elevation of the dam prior to dam construction was visible during construction. We found a thick organic layer with beaver cut branches when we were removing the dam. This showed us where the elevation of the valley was prior to dam construction. The dam being removed for this project was constructed out of permeable sandy loam texture soil and rock. The dam was based on a permeable foundation of rock and organic soil, tree roots, and logs. And this explained why water was flowing under the dam that can cause failure of the dam. And here we're restoring a floodplain following removal of a dam. The excavator is armoring the floodplain and the channel of the stream with a thick layer of rock, about 50 centimeters thick. The rock armoring extends up the banks on either side to prevent erosion during a flood and in case a beaver builds a dam across this valley. And here you see the arrow points to a buried vertical grade structure, and this was built following the removal of the dam. Large rock were placed across the restored channel and floodplain, and these were placed to prevent head cuts that could be advancing from downstream. You never know what's going to happen downstream. Maybe somebody will do some channeling. Maybe head cuts are located there. When these head cuts reach your project area, you don't want them to unzip them and destroy them. So if you place this large rock across the floodplain and channel, it will protect your project from erosion. So here's where we built a series of wetlands within a drained basin following dam removal. And these wetlands were built to provide habitat for western toads and a diversity of wildlife species. We placed large woody debris in the wetlands to provide waterfowl with masking sites and birds with perches. And snags were placed in and around the restored wetlands to provide birds with perches and bats with roosting habitat. This photo shows two of the many wetlands that were restored in this drained reservoir basin. And the restoration of these shallow water wetlands helped to mitigate the loss of the lake habitat. When you restore wetlands in a basin of a drained reservoir, you can generally expect them to fill quickly with groundwater. And here, large woody debris is being delivered for use in protecting the valley, being restored from OHV damage. And this woody debris was spread in and around the restored streams and wetlands by using excavators. So we loosened soils with the rough and loosen technique, and then spread the woody debris. And this would help people to keep on the trails and not impact the restored project. So areas of soil that were exposed when the water was drained from the reservoir were loosened to control erosion and to restore a diversity of native plants and to discourage off-road vehicles from traveling through the restored areas. We used the rough and loosen technique. We added large woody debris, snags, and we've restored wetlands in this valley. So here's another smaller dam before it was removed. And here the excavator is removing the smaller dam, and we're using the buried organics as a guide to how far to remove the dam, to what elevation. Large woody debris is placed in the valley where the dam is removed, and this shows the site following removal of the dam. It's quite a mess, but it's good habitat, and nobody's going to tear it up with off-road vehicles. And here's another dam that we removed, and this is a dam with a fairly steep slopes, narrow top. Look at the large trees growing on the dam. These have really jeopardized the integrity of the dam. The roots provide sites for water to flow through the dam. It can cause failure of the dam. So here the excavator is removing the dam. All the large rocks uncovered by dam removal were saved so they could be used to armor slopes to prevent erosion and to build these buried vertical grade control structures to control head cuts. So here the dam has been removed, the stream channel has been restored, vertical grade control structures are now being installed, soils are being loosened using the rough and loosen technique. The stream is now flowing over the removed dam and the restored valley. So in summary, valleys may be restored when you remove dams. And dams can be removed, and it doesn't have to cost that much money. It takes careful planning and oftentimes the approval of government agencies to remove a dam, but it can be done. And the habitat that you build can provide habitat for species at risk and endangered species. So removal of dams and the restoration of valleys, we can do this now to protect people, their property, their homes, and to help the environment. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. If you are interested in working with me or have questions about dam removal and valley restoration, I'd be happy to work with you. Thank you.